Hi, everybody. Joel Ledlow, Evolution Martial Arts, joined by Ian today,
Hey,
as is usual. Uh, we, we, as we often do, sometimes we talk shit about stuff, and sometimes we really just deep dive into kinetic energy and shaping kinetic energy, which is what we were doing before we started right now. And I was literally like, dude, hit record because we're just talking about stuff. And if you don't know, Ian does tricking as well as performance, like acrobatics, really cool stuff. And it's always a challenge for me to look at how he's manipulating the body in a three-dimensional world, like going up and then rotating. And we were just talking about the feet being split versus together. And he was just sharing some of the new stuff that he's working on. And then I was also sharing a little bit about talking about my son who's doing high jump, and we just really like that. So it doesn't really matter if you are a martial artist, great. If you do tricking, great. If you do dance, great. If you do track and field, great. If you do any athletic endeavor, that's kind of what we're going to talk about. Hopefully, at least some. I mean, sometimes we talk shit, but
well, it
today we're going to talk about cultivation. And that's really kind of one of the main things that we like is cultivating, and that's cultivating attributes instead of, I will say, in the martial arts world, somebody's really, your jab has to be this way, or your hook has to be this way, your fighting stance has to be here, your hands should be in this pose. It's like, really? I'm not cultivating a jab. I'm using a quote unquote jab to cultivate my capacity to hit. And I think that's where a lot of people miss it in the martial arts world. Not everybody, gang. I know lots of people who can punch and kick and throw and choke and break and all that fun stuff quite well. And not all of them, actually, most of them aren't Jeet Kune Do people.
there's two pieces of
So,
advice that stem to mind when you talk about that, and the first one is you don't come to learn the skill; you come to learn from the skill. And what
yeah.
that means is not necessarily a technique that's being taught to you; it's the understanding of, like you say, shaping kinetic energy, but also how to modify it to fit whatever situation you're trying to place it in. Hence, where things like
Mm-hmm.
sparring or aliveness drills come into play. Um, with that, I think that you start to see that within first, I guess, if you're diehard martial arts, within your own art. And then you go and
Mm-hmm.
train other things, and you start to see how that stuff that you've learned and cultivated starts to
Yeah.
appear in other forms of movement or martial arts in general as a whole. A great example would
Yeah.
be,
It's like saying, I'm going to put this into cooking. It's like saying, I make lasagna, right? Well, so do you. But the lasagnas are different lasagnas because we have different recipes. And
right,
that's
maybe I like mine
fine.
more
It's
salty.
still quote unquote lasagna, but they're just not the same.
Right. And with that, you start to see that, that's where the philosophy, at least for me, comes back, right? All those things of,
Hmm.
you talked about it on the channel a while ago of use what is useful or whatever, but like you start with the structure, which is the second thing that you taught me, and then you learn to break the structure. But we're not looking at the structure as in the tradition. We're looking at, regardless of who taught us, what does the body, do? How can the body perform at its maximum efficiency
Hmm.
within the specified context? I feel because there's lots of different ways
Yeah.
to throw a punch. There's lots of different ways to do a backflip. If I want my backflip to be really low, I'm going to throw my head back and try to keep my hips low. But if I'm trying to set really high for a big trick, I need to know how to modify that and change the dynamic of what I'm trying to do with my body to perform the variation. But it's still a backflip.
Yeah. So I'm going to take this into, so for everybody listening, Ian is in Las Vegas right now and really gets to hang out with some astounding athletes who do some phenomenal stuff. He'll send me a video clip of some of these people. They're just his friends, just hanging out. They're all a really cool group. Uh, and, one person is really, really great at something, and one person is really great at something else. And then they'll share information about how they do a trick. And sometimes it's taking Ian on a different path than what he started on. And sometimes, a couple of times you've gone, hey, this is what this person does, and they're really phenomenal, and I can't reach their level. But that particular approach to this movement doesn't work for me. Like, it's just not my thing. And you said that you've actually given a whole lot to it. And that kind of goes into what I want to point out, especially in the JKD world. Holy crap, there's so much like, this is what Bruce said, and that's what Bruce said. No, you got to do this, you got to do that. Okay, look, yes and no. Take whatever and throw out whatever. There's two things. A lot of the philosophy, as Ian was referencing, the philosophy of something as an individual, as a fighter, as a martial artist for myself, I can do whatever the hell I want to. Doesn't make any difference.
Right.
If I'm training in Jeet Kune Do or in the Kung Fu system, then I teach two different martial arts, and they have curriculums to them. As an instructor, my job is to have an understanding of all the information in that curriculum so that I can guide students through movement. As an individual martial artist who's applying themselves or expressing themselves, I can do whatever the hell I want to. And I tell my students all the time, just because I'm teaching you a sidekick doesn't mean you have to do a sidekick. If you don't like a sidekick, don't do
Don't
a
use a
sidekick,
sidekick.
but let's explore it, and that'll give you some good information coming back. And I think a lot of it, as Ian was saying, I would say, hey, we come to learn from Jeet Kune Do. We're not learning Jeet Kune Do, we're learning from it. The movements are going to help us explore how to express ourselves. This goes back into what I was talking about before with cooking. If you have a recipe, that's the uniqueness. You might have the recipe. That's what you learn in class. That's the movement. Here's your jab. Here's your front snap kick. That's what your teacher should be teaching you. You're doing a backflip. Here's the basic mechanics. This is your lasagna. Now, as you continue on, you maybe, oh, you know what? I don't really like this as much, or I don't really like that cheese. I'm going to change it to this cheese, or that's a little bit heavy. Maybe I'm going to go, or I'm a vegetarian. I want to do vegetables in there. Or I'm going to change the vegetables. I'm going to do turkey. Whatever it is, and you can pick anything. It could be stir fry. It's still called stir fry, but you could do it with pork. You could do it with chicken. You could do it with beef. You could do it with lamb. You could do it with seafood. You could change. You could do just veggies. What kind of rice do you want to have?
Right.
All of these things are in there, but the basic mechanics of it, the overall structure. Hey, this is a jab. What does that mean? Oh, it's a lead hand straight punch. Then you start tweaking it out, but you're ultimately going to find it by trial and error, just like you would with cooking. And everybody who cooks knows that. I make stuff and I season to taste. Ian makes stuff, he seasons to taste. We might make the exact same thing, even with the same ingredients, but we still might change those a little bit. And that's the individuality. But if we're making a dish, we're going to still make the same dish. At some point, it's sort of like, here's the recipe, here's the basic ingredients you need to make it. And then after you know how to make it and you've done it a few times, you start exploring. And that's true for everything.
I th-
And I really think that's one of the big problems in martial arts, kind of in general, maybe the world. Maybe people just don't quite get that idea that you don't have to have it. It's got to be this way. Now, maybe you're going to be like the secret recipe for Coca-Cola, right? You're going to do original Coke or new Coke or whatever. What's the secret? What's the secret recipe in there? And
Cocaine.
maybe it is, and that's fine. And if you're trying to recreate something and everybody says, well, you can't be Bruce Lee, that's Bruce Lee. I agree. But I can understand, like, Bruce Lee made barbecue sauce. I don't know his exact thing, but I can make barbecue sauce and I can kind of follow the same thing because the ingredients are on the back these days. You don't
Right.
know the proportions maybe, but you can find the ingredients and then you just play with it until you find it,
I think
which
that,
is Ian does all the time. We were literally just talking about this before I said hit record,
yeah, yeah.
of playing with movement all the time.
I think that in order for you to even get to what we're talking about, though, like you have to walk the path of the fundamentals, you know? So the opposite side of this is like, you can't just be like, oh, this isn't useful because I don't like it. oh, this isn't useful because I
Yeah.
tried it on one training partner, and in what context did you try it? Did you mess around and then you were like, hey, I'm going to do this? Did you really work the crap out of the drill? Did you try to apply it in sparring and was unsuccessful? Did you actually
Mhm.
go fight somebody? Which, hopefully not. And then the other thing is that just because this thing doesn't work for you, especially in the world of teaching, don't discourage other people from maybe finding it for them. Something that
Yeah.
Sifu Joe, you told me that Sifu Jerry told you was that you teach everything because what might not work for you
Yep.
might work for someone else, but it's still part of
Even
the,
if I'm not good at it,
yeah,
and Ian is a great example of this. There are things that I can show him that he can do better than me. I'm like, look, I'm good, but his body dynamic and his fast twitch is different on there's movements. He's just better at them than I am. That's just the way it is. I think some people, their ego gets in the way and they don't want to have someone, I'm Sifu or master or sensei or whatever, and they don't want anyone to outshine them. That's not what it is for me. I hope you should have the idea that everybody's going to surpass you at some point because you're going to be dead. So, and if they're alive, they're better than you. But
yeah, because they're still around.
yeah,
Well, and that goes,
no,
but it goes in both ways too, right? Because I tend to not favor grappling. I love throwing. I love the idea of throwing, but single leg takedowns, takedowns in general, that's not my thing. I don't have a
no.
wrestling background.
I was gonna say, you know what? I'm gonna have to come back to it. I keep there's a thought on the edge of my brain that is just sort of. I may blurt it out in a second, and we'll come back to it. You know me, it'll come
Yeah,
back.
no worries.
When you're dealing with a lot of information, sometimes we're not scripted, gang. So this is just Ian and I chatting it up, and kind of, which is what we normally do.
Right.
And hopefully, you're getting some benefit out of it. Oh, here's what I was gonna say. We're talking about exploring it. So if you're going to do a movement, pick a movement. I don't care what it is, right? And we're going for the higher levels of experts, those who should have expertise as teachers or as practitioners. If you're a hobbyist, an enthusiast, and you're just doing it, and you're like, hey, you know what? I kind of came in. I've been doing class twice a week for a couple of years now, and we kind of came in and we were doing a inverted kick, and I didn't really, it's not really. I got tight hips. It's not really my thing. I did a couple of classes and we were playing with it. I didn't do it. Okay, great. But shut up. Like, don't get on somebody's board and start talking shit like you know something, or justifying like an inverted kick isn't very good and Bruce said throw it out, or master so and so said. Shut up.
Yeah.
Like, that's
Energy
the
training
people
doesn't
that piss us
work.
off. If you want to make that choice, great. I'm a hobbyist, an enthusiast, and you know what? That's too much work for me. But if you're an expert, you should have discarded something after years of practice. Years. Okay. If you haven't been doing it, and I don't mean like twice a week years, I mean like you're kind of visiting that thing 4, 5, 6 times a week, at least on your own
Right.
for a bit, and really going through there for 2, 3 years.
I think
That's
that,
kind of the difference, gang, is we need to be doing that. I don't want my doctor to I kind of thought about something. I heard about
yeah,
it once. I Googled it. No, I want my doctor to have paid attention to that and have done some research, especially if they're a specialist working on something. I want them to have that experience and that in-depth knowledge. And then, hey, I don't want to do this because my experience over this long period of time and multiple explorations have shown me this other thing. It's not a very good choice here. There's a better choice here.
I would even argue like it's not even that, it's just that it doesn't work for you. Because there's tons of people that have been training for years and honestly, they don't fucking get it. And I don't mean that to,
Yeah.
disrespect anybody or
No, they
anything,
just don't
but
have the capacity.
yeah, and that's not a knock towards anybody because there's certain things that I just don't have the capacity for. Speaking for myself, like
Absolutely.
I am a shitty tumbler. As much as I can teach tumbling way better than I can tumble, talking about like round off flips and whatnot. But when it comes into teaching it, I'm like, yeah, I get it. I know how to, get you there. But I wouldn't say, oh, well, I'm not very good at tumbling, so it doesn't work. Just do everything off one foot. I'd be like, nah, like, here's the mechanics of how this works. And maybe you can help bring me up one day to help me figure this shit out.
Yeah.
But there's
I find, oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
I, I was just gonna say, like, there's a couple of issues about where this comes from. Like, for one, I feel like, especially with the emergence of combat sports or sports in general, people tend to be entitled to an opinion because they represent, they're passionate about what they like to see and about what they think
Yeah.
is a preconceived notion of quote unquote what's successful. Like, how many times
And they're fans. I'm a fan of this person, this fighter.
Right. So how many times do you see, when do you see this happen in MMA? Like, MMA is the end all be all fuck all, like whatever, So that's one thing.
And are those guys today at the level of UFC 20 years ago?
Right.
I see so many people out there going, oh, well, I'll do some MMA stuff, do some BJJ. I'm like, are you Hoist?
Here's a great
Because,
example.
like, none of you fight like Hoist fought.
No,
He was a
nobody moves like that.
monster.
And we saw this video of some cat, posting a video that palm thrust doesn't work. And it's like,
That's ridiculous.
hello, Bass Rutten. And then he said in the comments, don't quote Bass Rutten to me. It's like, so what the fuck are you making a video about? What are you, like, again, no disrespect, but it brings up the question about, like, what are you putting out
I would
there?
say a little bit of disrespect to him.
Well,
A little bit of disrespect. Hang on 1 second, gang. Hold on. Just keep talking, Ian.
I think the thing with that, because I don't want to get into the mechanics of a palm thrust, but no matter how you shape it, you're forming the means of a jab. When you punch, your fist is extending to someone else's extremities, regardless of what the target is. And the motion of the 3 points of the shoulder, the elbow, and whatever's extended to your wrist, no matter what shape is on the end, reaches out to hit somebody. It's kind of like action figures where you can take your hand off and it might be a fist, it might be a karate chop, it might be something, but the mechanic of a punch doesn't change. And that's where Sifu Joel and I come in, and we get disappointed about people not covering those kinds of things because they don't understand the fundamental mechanics about how to shape a very basic hit. Because if that person did, they wouldn't even be mentioning, oh, the palm thrust is going to break your knuckles or this and that. It's a hit. It's a fucking hit. You should know that.
Yeah. And I mean, if someone is charging at you and you put your arm out with your palm, that's a palm thrust. If you Heisman Trophy, if you're a football fan, like college football, Heisman Trophy, that's a palm thrust.
A push.
When he's doing a little stiff arm in there, it's a palm thrust, gang. It's not very complicated.
Yeah, that's a whole different thing though. But
yeah,
but
it's you know what I was gonna say, a lot of people. I had somebody do this once. I was watching a video years ago, and I was a little bit just like palm to face with this one because someone said I gave a comment, and I said, well, okay, blah blah blah, X, Y, and Z. Here you go. This is my opinion. It's not quite as good as it could be, but you could improve X, this and this and this. And the guy was like, well, you can tell just by looking at it. And I was like, yeah, I can. Kind of like my job. It's what I do every day. I watch people move. For me, it's mostly in a martial arts setting. If I watch athletes doing martial arts movement, but I've also seen, tricking stuff. I've also seen track and field stuff where I'm analyzing the movement in a different way.
Swimming.
It's like saying, okay, so if you go to a really good musician and they look at another musician, grab an instrument, they can tell pretty quickly if that person has a clue about playing or not, right? If you get a great guitarist picking up guitar, they're going to hold it differently than someone like me, right? Same thing if you get someone who's going to get a violin. If you get me to hold a violin, I'm not going to be very good, right? I'm not going to have the same way. And a person who is a concert violinist would be able to look at me, just no sound, and go, yeah, probably not. If I watch me play, I could probably play quote unquote, because I can't, but they could watch me play with zero sound and go, that's crap. Because I have done, here's why I know this. I've done this with students of mine who actually can play guitar, and I have to be really careful because I'll do air guitar to them as like a demonstration inside of, like, hey, like this, and like if you're playing guitar, and I'll hold up and they'll look to see which freaking chord I'm playing. They're like, oh, that was an E chord. I was like, what are you I made up some stuff. I was literally fake stuff, but because they were so practiced in it, they could just see me doing a quote unquote air guitar with my hands, and they knew what I was playing or what I should have been playing. I wasn't. I don't know.
I think it's really
So
important to connect the power of observation with your training, though,
yeah.
because a lot of people get into, well, a lot of people I think can see it, and which is actually a really cool thing. And that was something that you and I did, and along with the rest of your school, when we would watch fights together, right? Even people that
Mm-hmm.
had a low skill set were able to see a lot of this stuff, which is honestly why it's so baffling why we get some of the comments that we do, or you know what I mean, that it's like, what the fuck are you guys watching? No offense, but shit. uh
I think it's something that isn't really taught, and I don't know if it's because it's a skill or an aspect of training that isn't passed down. But I found to be really valuable to be able to analyze my own movements. I need, and then practice seeing someone else's movements. You need to practice
yeah.
and be critical, but not in a negative way. We're not going like, oh, you suck. It's not like you're a horrible person. This is looking at the efficiency of the movement. And maybe that's a difference. So when Ian and I look at somebody, we start asking questions instead of applying answers that are preconceived that we brought with us. Hey, this is what it should be. I'm looking for, I was talking to class about this. Uh, I think it's kind of the institutionalized learning process of we walk in and you have 100%, and you're thinking that if you take a test, they're going to take that away. So that idea is like, I have $100 and I got a 70 on my test. You took $30 away from me. And that's not the learning we're actually doing.
Right.
It's the complete opposite. When you walk in the door, you have $0. I mean, if you walked into my classroom and you had $100 in your pocket and I took $30 away from you and then you walked out, it'd be a 70%, right? That kind of making that parallel. You'd be a little bit like, that sucks. But if you walked in, you had $0 and I gave you $40, you'd be like, holy crap, I have $40 I didn't have before. Even though it's way less than the 70,
It's not out to
because it's
detract.
a different perspective on that.
Yeah, it's not out to detract from what you already know. It's the same thing that you told me when I first came into class, because I had Wing Chun and Hung Gar training under Sifu Ricky Latoria from Peru. And you said, hey, I know you got some stuff. Take this journey with me, put it in your pocket, and you're going to see how later down the road it's going to combine with everything that you have. But it's the same analogy of emptying your cup. It's the same analogy
Mm-hmm.
of, listen, you have to cultivate not just the skill itself, but the mindset. You can't go into playing football thinking that you're going to do it baseball style. You can't go into
Yeah,
any kind of
it's a great
situation or
example.
skill cultivation thinking that you're going to force what you already have within that world. Can
Mm-hmm.
understanding baseball a little better help you with certain aspects of football? Yeah. I mean, if you know how to yeet a baseball, it might help you develop, similar mechanics to how a football is thrown, but those are two different balls. You have to realize
And
that
they,
it's
yeah,
not the
they throw it
same.
very differently.
But it also you know what I mean? You're still throwing, but there's nuance to it.
I was say, I also noticed that the guys, at least that I, grew up with and was around, I'm not this guy. I was not in that club. It was all the other guys that could do that. If they could throw a football pretty well, they could probably throw a baseball pretty well.
Yeah. So
Just because it's a throwing action and they just had to make modifications. But the goal was to throw, and you fit into that environment of a baseball. You didn't pick up a baseball and try to throw it like a football, and you didn't try to throw a football like a baseball.
that's what I was talking
You were
about. Yeah.
still throwing, but you fit into it. And I Ian, you're right. That's part of what is really massively missing, and it's just that's what you should be doing. It seems so basic to us, and something that is widespread, just not there
I think that
in a
this,
lot of in a lot of places.
sorry, Sifu, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but
No, that's fine.
I think that this goes into maybe the last topic that you and I can talk about, which is the, I'm going to be just 100% blunt with this, but the fucking attitude that we get when it comes into having a discussion about martial arts. um, I can't believe how fucking cocky the YouTube keyboard warriors are. Actually, I can
Holy
believe
shit.
it. But what I would say is rather than just talk shit about them and perpetuate the negativity aspect, I would say, like, you have so much to gain from starting a conversation rather than
Mm-hmm.
trying to assert your status or to disagree even, or to project your skepticism. There's certain things on the internet. Unfortunately, I feel like Jeet reputation is absolutely terrible on YouTube, and that's
That's
something
a whole
that's
other.
out of
That's
our
a, maybe we'll
control.
do that one
Yeah,
next.
well,
Of like, should we even be calling ourselves JKD? That'll be our next one, maybe.
right.
I
But
want to go in. Oh, go
I
ahead.
will
And I
say,
got my thought down, so we'll be
no,
fine.
no worries. But what I wanted to say was that having a conversation about different things, or maybe projecting different ideas, right? If you're going to say something sucks, offer a solution. If you're going to question something, then do it as a means of showing respect, as opposed to oh, you guys are fucking garbage or whatever, because you're not learning anything. It doesn't it doesn't do what the entire goal of us putting information out is in the first place. We're not telling you, hey, this is how you're successful in a fight. And unfortunately, there's a lot of
No.
fucking channels out there that are doing that are lying to you because you don't know what's going on in
Yeah.
a fight. The
They're
set
they're selling you something prepackaged.
Yeah, they're selling you some shit, like some false hope that's like, oh, just do this and you're going to be successful. And I'm sorry, fellas, but like, life doesn't work that way. Fights don't work that way. But instead, take a look at what we're trying to do here and say, we're cultivating a skill. I don't care if you don't think that it's not going to work in a fight. But what we're doing, I guarantee you, is going to have something useful that you can pull away, make your own modifications, start your own ideas. You're not our students, and that's fine. But but
Yeah.
the information that we have comes from years and years of pondering, of cultivation, of execution in so many different contexts that it's a matter of doing exactly what Sifu Joel and I are doing right now, which is trying to get better.
I would say we always say this. Don't take our word for it. We're sharing our ideas. You don't have to agree with us, but you should listen to us, hear us out, and consider what we're saying. If you're not willing to do that, then why should we listen to you fucking tippity tap do bullshit comments? And if you're just going to use our platform as an opportunity to jump on to propagate some preconceived notion you have, or some cult, fanboy thing, fuck off.
Yeah.
Like, and as Ian was saying, everybody kind of gets on there. The YouTube world, where I'm on YouTube, Ian's on YouTube, but this thing on there, they get to hide behind a computer, that keyboard warrior. Like, one of my teachers, Ed, he said I was talking to him once, and he's like, I saw somebody getting on there, and they were writing the dumbest shit, and he goes, I thought there's no way they would ever open their mouth in front of you in person, because you would just pound the shit out of them. That's the world we come from. Now, look, gang, I learned a lot of times keep my mouth shut because the other person could beat shit out of me. I mean, we are martial artists. That is kind of the world. It's not necessarily like, hey, blah blah. Most of the people who have given me a serious thumping are my really good friends, longtime training partners, and very respected instructors. Because I wouldn't put myself in those situations to receive that kind of ass kicking from some dipshit
I mean,
in there. So
the
yeah, I think Ian and I are in sync with this one. You don't have to agree with us, but you should hear us out, consider what we're saying, and if it's a movement thing, try it out for yourself. Don't take our word for it. I don't tell my students to take my word for it. They're paying me for the privilege of my knowledge and hands on. And I still tell them, don't take my word for it. Figure it out for yourself. I'm going to help guide you and then come back and you're going to find your own. It's sort of like doing a taste test. Well, we were talking about making with recipes. Here's how to make it, but you have to taste it because what I like and what you like are not going to be the same. Doesn't discount my information. It just means you should probably consider my information. As Ian was saying, I did with him. I'm going to finish up with one more thing that I told him, just because it's funny. Is hey, you have other information, learn this. Then when you walk out the door, you can take whatever you have and you can do what you want with it. But you need to be fully there and open to learning whatever is being taught, or don't waste your time being there.
Right.
The other thing is, I have never been around trickers until I met Ian. And I was like, what the hell is tricking? And he goes, well, it's like this. And he like jumps up and does a flip thing. And I was like, holy shit. And I pulled out my phone and I said, wait, can you do that again? And he's like, yeah. So I videoed him and then I took that home because I was showing my wife at the time.
And that was the very first class that I showed up to.
Yeah, very first class.
On that,
so there you go. Drink your tea.
Yeah.
Or not. Maybe we should have drank our tea a few times in this one, but hopefully everybody's got a little bit of something from this, and you're at least thinking and open to resources. If you're going to dedicate that time and energy, your time and energy into watching or listening to something or reading something, then you should be open to really finding out what knowledge is trying to be shared. And if you're not, why would you waste your time with it? If you see a video and you go, I hate this, this is stupid, well, turn it off.
Go somewhere else.
If you're listening to an audio track and you don't like it, turn it off.
And the other thing too, everyone, is that, I hope that this, if anything, educates you to be more educated and more observant about what you're learning on YouTube. From a different side of experience, Sifu Joel and the Kung Fu that I have is the only formal training that I've had. Everything that I know from tricking and acrobatic martial arts, guess where I learned that shit? YouTube. But you have to know how to navigate and how to see information that's good and information that's not, that's not so good. And even sometimes I watch videos that doesn't have some really good stuff, and I still try to pull something positive from it. But
and you have to try it out. I know Ian would try it out and try it out and try it out and try it out. Just try. He didn't just watch a video and go, "Oh, I got it."
No.
He watched a video and then he would attempt it and eat shit more than a few times, and then watch the video and go, "Oh, I didn't do that right," and then go eat shit some more. And eventually he would figure it out. And then that got him into working with other people who had done similar things.
And now this is the discussions that we have today, sitting, here at the table with you. And hopefully you guys, get there as well, if that's, what you want to cultivate. So this is episode 2 of Evolution Martial Arts. Drink your tea. Remember, stay thirsty. I don't know.
I'm just kidding. Until next time, gang. We'll see you later.
Bye, everyone.